1. I currently go to a large university in Philadelphia, and my school isn't in the greatest part of the city. I'm a senior now, and I've sort of learned to just keep my head down, and most of the people in the area will leave me alone. The one exception that I've had to this was in my freshman year. My roommate freshman year was an absolute madwoman, stealing my stuff, threatening to physically assault me, and spreading rumors about me. I generally try to stay out of my room for the most part, to just avoid any interaction with her, until I was able to get a new roommate the next semester. As a result, I spent a lot of time at the library or at other friends' places. A few weeks into my first semester, I think it was around early October, I was hanging out at a friend's place. He lived on the other side of campus, probably a 15-minute walk from my dorm room, but my path from the room to his dorm never left campus. I had been warned prior to moving into my dorm room that campus was the safest place for students, because the locals generally stayed off campus unless they were grabbing food from a food truck. Keeping that in mind, I really didn't mind walking back from my friend's dorm late at night, since the path was well lit, and the only people I saw were other students. Regardless, it was getting late, and it was a weeknight, so I told my friend I was going to head out. He offered to walk me home, but I declined, saying I would be fine, which was my first mistake. The walk back was perfectly fine up until I got to the block that my dorm building was on. For context, there was another empty dorm building on the block that I lived on. It was scheduled to be torn down later that year because there was black mold everywhere inside. But at the time it was still standing and there were absolutely no lights outside of it. There was a courtyard behind the building, which I used as a shortcut, which was my second mistake. As I entered the courtyard, I used my phone as a flashlight to kinda guide my way through the space. As I was nearing the other end of it, I heard someone call out, "Miss!" Obviously, my first thought was nope, and just kept walking, pretending I didn't hear anything, and picked up my pace. But the voice called again, "Wait, miss!" At this point, I was nearly out of the courtyard, and there was some light coming from the windows of my dorm building, so I could kind of see what was going on, without completely relying on my flashlight. I turned around to see who had been calling out to me, which was my third mistake, and was met with a man. He looked so ordinary, except for his oddly wide smile, and the fact that he was carrying a rather heavy-looking trash bag. "Hey, miss, I have something for you." No, I think I'm okay. I need to be getting home." "No, I think you need this. Let me show you." He opened the trash bag and reached his hand in. I didn't know what to expect, so I bolted. I ran further from the courtyard and toward the ramp that led up to my building, thinking I could outrun him, but I was sorely mistaken. Despite the fact that there was about 10 to 15 feet between us, as soon as I turned, his hand was around my wrist. "Miss, I have something for you. I really think you need it." Feeling trapped and unsure what to do, I sighed, defeated. I hoped to God that someone would look out their window and see what was going on, or someone else would be walking back to the building at a late hour and see us. I wanted to scream. But I was scared that if I drew attention to us, that he would do something that would make me really regret trying to get help. Again, not the greatest part of the city. He smiled at me, like he knew I wasn't going to try and call out and let go of my wrist. I didn't realize how tightly he was gripping me until he released it. He took a step back from me and reached back into the trash bag again. My heart was pounding, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but it definitely wasn't what he pulled out of the bag. It was a clock, an old digital alarm clock. The thing had to be at least 20 years old, and it was encrusted with dirt, like he pulled it out of a junkyard. I was stunned at the sight of the yellow and orange plastic, and I realized that he was actually trying to give me the clock. I thought it might have been a bomb. "Here, this is just for you." "Oh, I really don't need one. I have a clock up in my room," I said, gesturing towards the massive building behind me. "This one's different." "What the fuck? What's that supposed to mean?" "I mean, mine didn't, but don't most alarm clocks have radios built into them?" I took a step back from him, but as I stepped back, he stepped closer, mirroring my movement. He reached out, presenting the clock to me. I took another step back, he took another one forward. I knew my back was literally going to be against the wall of the dorm building if I took another 2 steps back, and wasn't sure where to go. I felt like I had no choice but to go against everything my body was telling me not to do and accept the clock. I reached out and noticed that where he had grabbed my arm was already bruising. With my hand now outstretched, he placed the clock in my hand. I felt so dirty having it in my hand. I don't know how to describe it, but I had instantly felt like I had finished rolling around in the dirt. My arm felt like it was throbbing, and the clock was so heavy. I felt like it was getting heavier with every passing second. I knew it just felt like that because I was freaking out, but it didn't make the experience any less terrifying. I didn't know what to do. The guy was still smiling at me. I blurted out, "Thanks," and spun around, gripping the clock. I took a step away from him toward the ramp leading up to my building, and he took a step back. I decided that this was my chance to bolt for the door. I spun around on my heels and took another few steps before hearing, "You're so beautiful. I love you," called out behind me. I turned back and the man was out of sight. I screamed. I didn't know what I just got myself into, but I didn't want to be any part of it. I sprinted toward the door of the building, dumping the clock in the trash can outside in the hallway. I still thought that there was a decent chance that it was a bomb, and if it was going to explode, I wanted to do so in a contained space. Nothing came of the man or the clock, other than the bruise on my arm. It healed completely within a few days, and soon after that I had sort of forgotten about the incident. I think I just repressed the memories and didn't want to unpack what I went through. I still try not to think about it, and the only reason I'm writing this now is because one of my current, not crazy roommates had brought it up a few days ago, and the floodgates of my brain opened, and I felt I needed to share what happened. 2. My name is Shen. I live in France. If I remember correctly, it was 2017 when this story happened. We had my half-brother and I, 18 and 19 years old. We lived in France. Only the mother of my half-brother, she lives in Morocco, and so every year we spend a little bit of time there when he goes to see her. I had my license at the time, so we got the idea to buy a car and go through Spain to visit. We take the road from the French Riviera. 3 days of driving we expect, including, of course, 2 nights and a hotel. Everything was going well in Spain. Then it's time to take the boat to the port of Malaga to go to Morocco, where we arrive in Tangier. It was around 5:30 p.m. when we arrived at the hotel in Rabat, a city in Morocco. We were settling in, and everything's fine. And this is where things start to get weird. In booking our room, the hostess was very helpful and professional. However, when talking to my brother, it starts to get a bit weird. "What time exactly are you leaving tomorrow? Do you plan to take breaks on the road? Where exactly are you going? Where exactly is your car parked?" She tells us to clean the car. We just remark, my brother and I, that it's odd without dwelling on it. The hostess asked us which road we were planning to take to get to Marrakesh. She suggested we take the road towards Casablanca, and is very insistent there without giving us time to answer. She told us it would allow us to see the beautiful landscapes, etc. And unfortunately, we followed the advice. The day is breaking, the car has not been washed, but in short, my brother and I, being very tired, slept until noon. We decide to visit Tangier a little before hitting the road. It's 10 p.m. After eating, we decide to hit the road. I prefer driving at night. It makes me more comfortable with the conditions. And everything is going well. We listen to music, we take breaks, take in some highway air. We eventually realize it's getting late. We have 3 hours of road left before arriving, and it is around midnight, so we're back on the road. On the highway, there are very high lampposts, some of which are not functional, so there were many areas where it was quite dark. I decided to be extra vigilant while driving. As we continued on, I saw a group of about 7 behind security guardrails. I saw them quite quickly, but they were crouching. It was like they were trying to hide while watching the road. My brother was sleeping at that time. I drive on, not really questioning it too much, but I did find it strange. I put myself in full headlights, and the second I do, I see a man in the right lane. I had to go about 120, 130 kilometers per hour on the center lane. I slowed down and reduced my speed to around 100. The man in question must have been in his 40s. And there he rushes to my car and throws a rock, or rather a big stone, on my windshield. I crush the brake pedal, in the incomprehension of what had just happened and the utter shock. I stop, remove the belt by pure reflex. My eyes are drawn toward the rearview mirror, and I see a dozen people running towards my car. I couldn't see really well, given that it was dark. But I saw that their hands were not empty, sticks and picks and such. Taken with fear, I click the first and crush the accelerator pedal. I speak to my brother while looking in the mirror. He doesn't answer. I turn my gaze to him, and he is unconscious. His skull is wide open, blood is flowing. The stone that had been launched is at his feet. Feeling lost, I don't know what to do. I try to put my hand at the level of the impact he had on his skull to reduce the blood flow while driving. I cry out his first name, but he does not respond and does not react. It is late, nobody on the road. The few cars that I can see do not stop. I do not know where we are. Where is the hospital? What am I going to do? A man comes up to me, he looks at me. I wave to him that I need help, and he stops. I speak Arabic, I understand it. But to speak it I have to reflect on my words, and when panicking that's not possible, but luckily he speaks French. I explain the situation to him. He tells me that he will come with me in my car and guide me to the hospital. That he just has to get his phone in his car, and that he will come back to his car by taxi. The situation is strange. It was cold, and why not just guide me from his car? With my brother and the hospital in mind as my only goal, I didn't think too much about it and accepted. He climbs in the back, and I start to ride. He says apologetically for not introducing himself his name is Saeed, and to take the first exit after about 10 kilometers. I introduce myself in turn and give him my first name. I hear a beep in the car. It's the phone he went to pick up from his vehicle. Except that it wasn't a phone, but rather a walkie-talkie. The questions multiply in my head as the conversation followed. They speak Arabic, and I understand them. I am Algerian, and the Moroccans have the same language with a few words, except that he does not know it. Saeed said to his interlocutor while speaking Arabic, "It's not them. It is not them. It is the right first name." The interlocutor asks him if he is sure, and Saeed tells him that yes. She told us the first name's Mark. The interlocutor says, "He saw your face. We will have to get rid of him anyway," and gives him an address to follow. I am frozen. I look at my brother, who still does not move. I try to find a solution out of this situation. I try to keep my calm. Saeed tells me not to take the planned exit, but the next time he tells me it will be easier. So I followed his instruction. If I had refused, he would surely have suspected something. We follow the planned exit. 2 minutes pass. The longest 2 minutes of my life. I see a vehicle that belongs to a certain police brigade. It is necessary that I let them know I am in danger, but how do I tell them? I decide to put myself at their level, but Saeed says I mustn't. I'm trapped. I'm 5 meters away. I decide to make a single call of the headlight to attract their attention, and hope that they see the windshield totally broken so that they stop me. Saeed raises the tone, and I say to be careful and not start over. But it's too late. They signal me to stop. I stop. Saeed tells me it's not over, and runs away from the car. They were gendarmes. I go to them in a panic, and explain the situation as best I can in Arabic. They call an ambulance, which arrives quickly. My brother is brought to the hospital, and he is immediately transferred to France to the Toulon military hospital, in which he will be plunged into an artificial coma for 3 weeks. His skull has been broken on the right side above his eye. He lost sight of the right eye. Today everything is better. He regains his sight little by little and takes back his life. Saeed has not been found, but the man who threw the stone was found and identified. He is known for several beatings in an organized gang. He is serving a 40-year sentence. And the most shocking is yet to come. The woman who was the hostess was part of the coup. but she has disappeared. The inspector explained their way of working to me. The hostess spots people passing by the hotel who are foreigners. When she asks where the car is, it is to transmit the license plate and that they can recognize the target. That's why she insisted that we take the road to Casablanca. They rob people, get rid of them and take their cars. However, I explained the conversation between Saeed and the man who threw the stone. When he told him it's not them, it's not them, it's not the right name, the inspector told me that we were very lucky and that he could not explain the situation to me on that. But surely he knew the reasons. I decided to do some research on my own, and there have already been stories like this where families, with infants even, were attacked, and only infants disappear. In the end, I think they were wrong, because when the hostess asked us what time we were going to leave, I said we were leaving around 5 p.m., but we only left the hotel at 5 p.m. We got on the road at 10 p.m. They had our license plate, but not the people they expected. The group of criminals were probably expecting other people than us. 3. I live in the UK, and in autumn, it gets dark around 4 p.m. There was a school autumn break that week, so all the kids were at home, so that means my girlfriend's brother was home too. I'd been with her for a year at that point, so her family knew me pretty well and her brother enjoyed my company. She had recently been pretty stressed out. Her parents were going out across the country for the day, so she had to look after her brother. But I thought that I'd give her the day to herself so she can just cool off. I asked her parents if I could look after their son for the day instead, and they agreed. So I came around 8 a.m., and they let me in before they set off. My girlfriend's brother woke up about an hour later, and she followed shortly afterwards. We went out to breakfast at a local cafe and went back to her house when we were done, and once I dropped her off, I took her brother to the park. We got there at about 2 p.m., and the place was pretty packed. Eventually, the sun started going down, and the place was completely empty by 4 p.m. I texted my girlfriend and told her we'd be home in a bit. She said okay. I'm gonna be honest, I completely lost track of time. Me and her brother were having fun being the only two in the park. Me and her brother were stood on top of this really tall climbing frame with a slide on it. It was almost pitch black at this point, so I was using my phone as a flashlight. A notification popped up on my screen, and it was my girlfriend asking where we were. I responded, "Oops, coming home now," and told her brother we had to go. He sighed and asked if we could go down the slide, and I said yes. Before I went down, I knew what the park looked like. There were streetlights all around it, benches everywhere, some trees, and places for the kids to play. When I came out of the slide, there was something weird. A man had appeared out of nowhere and was stood beneath one of the streetlights. He had a trench coat on and a beanie hat. I immediately got my girlfriend's brother behind me and called out to the man with a friendly, "Hi there." I got a response. He started groaning. I noticed he was swaying back and forth in the light, and he had his mouth open, drooling, with a blank look in his eyes. This man made me feel really fucking uneasy. I picked little bro up and kept checking on this guy the entire time. There was an exit to my left that led to the path back home, so I left out that way and kept checking behind me every few seconds. The guy was still stood there. The path where the guy was stood merges with a big main path if you walk out through some bushes, and so does the one I walked through. I was walking down the path for about 2 minutes, periodically checking behind me, and I thought I was in the clear. I wasn't. I was on a straight stretch of path with lots of streetlights when I saw him again. He was stood beneath one, looking up at it, and he was playing with something in his hands. I looked closer and realized it was a fucking knife. I kept walking and walking, checking behind me constantly. Girlfriend's little brother was so scared he had his head tucked into my chest. I noticed that the guy seemed to be moving to new streetlights whenever I turned around. Initially, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but I started counting them and realized 2 streetlights behind him had definitely turned into 5. I could faintly hear the groaning noise, and he was occasionally moaning as well. I picked up the pace a bit and turned a corner, getting into the last stretch of street before I got to my girlfriend's house. That was when I heard him behind the row of bushes. That moaning noise sounded angry, and I heard his heavy footsteps bounding down the path. The man was running. I immediately broke into a sprint and didn't stop until I turned an alleyway at the front of the street and got behind my girlfriend's house. There's a big bush there, so I crouched down behind that and spammed her phone with messages to open the back gate. I hugged her brother close until she opened it for us and got us in quickly. It felt like years. I went to the front of the house and had it confirmed that I'd managed to shake him. He was now in the street, circling where I'd been outside of the alleyway just moments ago. He was still moaning. He had that knife in his hand still. He started kicking people's bins over. I called the police immediately, but he was gone by the time they arrived, and as far as I know, they never found him. There was a similar incident near the area a few months ago I saw in a local Facebook group, and I don't think anything came of that either. Her parents thanked me for keeping their son safe and didn't hold any ill will against me for the situation. He went back to normal pretty much the day afterwards, but he still has nightmares about the event. When my country isn't in lockdown, I'm still allowed to look after him with my girlfriend, funnily enough. But we haven't been to that park ever since, and I still check over my shoulder and break into a cold sweat every time I'm alone in the street. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 532. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. When's this go up? The 4th of November. Oh joy, that means both tonight, and I can already hear it by the way, it's only the 2nd, both tonight and tomorrow we will be treated to the constant irritating sound of fireworks. Now you think because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and well, England's already headed for a second lockdown, and Scotland, I guarantee you, will definitely be there soon enough. You think people would be at home and not outside letting off fireworks, but I get a feeling that this year isn't going to be any less irritating than the previous ones. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.